And well, but I have Norman Long with me today. Norman, thank you, man, for being here. Thank you so much. You got your foundation diploma in art and design at the Blackpool and Field College from 1994 to 95. You got your BFA at Newcastle University. You finished that in 1999. And then you spent 10 years just painting and pursuing your own artistic interests, where during that time, during that time, you went to the Vermont Studio Center and met up with George Nick, who I understand has been a big influence, in your life artistically, and also he's been a friend of yours for some time now. You were telling me that when you go visit the States, you make sure to pay him a visit and to go to like maybe the MFA with them and chat about work and talk painting and things like that. And it's just wonderful, man, that you have access to someone who is so valuable and has been incredibly and continues to be influential in painting.
Yeah, I'm just one of George's many groupies who, call him up and go and bother him and just try and listen to him and learn things from him. But there's hundreds of us who have been inspired by George, and he's very generous. I don't know how he gets time to pen when he's so generous to so many painters.
It's amazing to me how like you were commenting before, like the force that he brings, like the magnitude that he brings. He himself is a force, but then like the force that he puts into his own work, into his paintings, and to think that he paints on location and he grapples with these very big problems in painting on site, where you and I both know, just from our own personal experience, how intimidating and how overwhelming that whole process can be. I need to sort of like decompress from moments like that in the studio to make sense of it, whereas that guy, man, he just does it right there on the spot, and he'll go back again and again and just go after it. And it's kind of like heroic in a way, like from like a romantic standpoint, right?
It's like that. So we were chatting just earlier and meeting. So first of all, George Nick, and then Scott Noel. Those were it's like getting in the ring with a heavyweight fighter. And you just, you think you're a good. I've never done boxing, so I'm just making it up. But you think you're a good boxer. You think you know a thing or two, and you're flat on your back. I remember literally doing that. George Nick gave a talk at the Vermont Studio Center, and I went back to my room and I just lay on my bed. I literally lay there and thought, what have I done so far? I've done nothing, like I either quit or I try and get up and try and somehow deal with this example, and over the next few days, we'd go out painting, like by the waterfalls at Vermont Studio Center. And George is an interesting guy. Like, I remember somebody saying, somebody worked in the art shop in Boston where he'd go to get his supplies. And she said, George is so grumpy. He's always grumpy. And he's like, and yet I remember like we were going to paint at the waterfall and I couldn't find Lindsay, who was my girlfriend at the time. I was looking for her. I couldn't find her. I said, George, we're going to have to go without her because I don't know where she is, before mobile phones and all that stuff. And he said, we're not going without her. Just wait. It just, I don't know why that stays in my mind, but he's a really nice bloke. But the thing is, he doesn't want time wasters. If you go with him and you've got a question, you're serious about painting, and you show him that this means a lot to you, and you're asking questions that are meaningful, he's got all the time in the world for you. But if you're just a time waster, or somebody who's not serious about painting, yeah, he's gonna, you know what I mean.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, in your case, it's good that you are serious about painting, you know, and he seems to respect you as a person and your work enough to keep up with fostering that relationship. So man, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, man. And so shortly after the Vermont Studio Center and meeting George Nick and continuing to develop new work, you then went to PAFA, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, to get your postdoc. You've been teaching in different colleges, in classes, you know, doing things online, and you even opened your own art school, close, right, kind of where you live, right? And there was, from that, like this sort of kind of artistic painterly community kind of emerged, right? And as you were sharing with me, that was something that was maybe unforeseen, but incredibly fortuitous and offered quite a gift for everybody, right? And but then the pandemic came and just squelched it, right? And for a time, and so now you're sort of working at kind of starting it back up again and seeing if there's something there. So is that something maybe you're considering, you know, as this new year has started and kicking up? Are you kind of thinking about getting back into something like that?
Yeah. So it was just a light switch, you know, the pandemic hitting, from having this community of artists who would come and use the studio. So every week, Tuesday nights, we'd have a model. We'd just hire a model, and whoever came and paid the money could come and paint from the model. We did the clothes model because I prefer that sort of situation, that naturalistic situation. But we did that for maybe 4 years, pretty much every Tuesday night. And then I'd have classes on Mondays, and then studio days where people could just come and use the studio. And yeah, it's a great community, and people would support each other in more ways than just, you know, how critiquing each other's paintings. You know, they'd support each other through difficult times, and they go on painting holidays together. And yeah, it's an incredible thing that sort of grew organically. And then the pandemic came, and obviously you can't have all those people in the classroom, so it just kind of went. And it's good to have a break from things like that, but I've really missed, as an artist, you know, in isolation, working in the studio mostly, I've really missed that opportunity to share these crazy ideas, these experimental ideas about painting or philosophies about painting. I've really missed being able to share that with others. So yeah, these students who signed up for my course now, thankfully, you know, a lot of people signed up, which is good. But they've no idea the explosion that they're going to get on that first day when I'm going to like put 4 years of crazy ideas, throw them at them. And it's great. Some of them are absolute beginners, and then some of them are incredibly good painters. And I love that dynamic. Like for me, there's no need to have this, level 1, 2, 3. That's just a whole lot of rubbish. You know what I mean? The first time somebody picks up oil paint, they can produce magic because they're fearless. They can just do something amazing. And then the stalwart who's been painting all their life and thinks they know everything, like they don't know everything. As you and I know, what is it Degas said? Like, oil painting is easy when you don't know how to do it. When you do know how to do it, it's really hard, you know, because you're aware of all these incredible painters and all the possibilities. And yeah, so I just love that class dynamic where you've got people of all abilities just investigating, just trying to be serious and look, and I love that.
Man, that's fantastic. Well, it seems that you know, to have all of that kind of happening simultaneously, even within like a shared space, as a teacher, you would have to be, or even just as an instructor, you know, you'd have to be very nimble, like quite nimble, to be able to kind of pivot from one person to the next according to the level and demand of their needs and kind of what they're up against. You know, when you're painting on location, do you find yourself as nimble and as able to pivot according to what you encounter?
No, definitely not. If I was out there every day, I know very good painters who are literally out every day. And so whether it's a gray day in an urban environment or, you know, a nocturne or any subject, any time of day, they've got a strategy that they can apply to that. And I'm a painter and I love all aspects of painting. So this juggernaut of plein air painting, I mean, it's an incredibly powerful movement now. I mean, it started over there in the States and it's really taken on over here. It's a wonderful community. It's got a lot of people painting. But it's a method, you know?
Right. Right.
Outdoor painting is a method. And
right.
I love all methods of painting, you know? I love the whole history of art, of oil painting, let's just say, is a history of every single painter has devised a new technique or added to the existing possibilities. And so for me, I can't say, oh, I'm not interested in Picasso or I'm interested in almost everybody. And even the ones I think I'm not interested in, ask me in 3 years' time and I probably will be, you know? Like I wasn't into Morandi. I saw an exhibition of Morandi and I thought it was the most boring exhibition I could, like, why would you paint another dusty bottle? You know what I mean?
Right.
And then 15 years later, it's like, whoa, this guy's great, you know? So anyway, getting back to the plein air thing, you know, there are painters who absolutely produce wonderful compositions, wonderful pieces of art, entirely outdoors. But that's not me usually. You know, for me, it's my batting average is not that great for finishing things outdoors. But it's still very stimulating, and it's important to get out of the studio, of course, because you become sort of, you know, you think too much. There's a lack of stimulation, and having to deal with changing visual elements is a brilliant training for a painter. Absolutely fantastic. But you know all this stuff. I mean, you do the same thing. You work outside, you get stimulated, and then you bring it indoors and cook it, as it were. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. No, that's right. And it's interesting because well, surprising and exciting to throw these things together into a cooker, because it's impossible to anticipate, you know, the result, like what is going to happen as a result. And you know, so I know that a lot of painters, there are a lot of painters, we're talking about methods and their methodology, that they're idea driven, concept driven, and the concept or the idea is what, you know, essentially is the governing factor, or the set of governing factors that that help to shape and structure the way that the image is made, and the handling of materials and development of technique and so forth. But I get the sense that perhaps maybe you're the type of painter that I mean, maybe I know that you are concept driven in a sense, but not directly. It's not like you have this idea and pursue it, right? In the sense of like, I have a story that I want to tell with these characters, and you know, like something mythological, for example, you know, but it seems to me that your ideas are really more like desires and maybe like values, like attachments that you have to, say, like something like color, you know, and what color can do, and how that relates to a spontaneous sort of happening, a moment, an encounter that is experienced out in the landscape or just in life, and that helps to manifest what the idea looks like, right? So it's like you have the value, and you have the you know, your sort of core set of values and desires, and like there's even like a hierarchy within that, right? Which are always subject to change, you know. But the shaping, the visual manifestation of that is where the landscape, or where the figure, where the interior, something from life comes into play, because it embodies that, it imbues that. And then it's like recognized, and then it's pursued, right? And that's a very different process than, say, like being in the studio, having this idea, and kind of, you know, generating the visual manifestation of the idea, you know, say through other paintings, or other, you know, other attempts that other painters have had in producing that, you know, borrowing from them, and then kind of augmenting and altering it to suit, you know, the intended purpose, in climate, for example. And so how do you deal with the evolution, with the idea that you have evolving? Do you find that sometimes, like, you're caught with having the rug pulled out from underneath you, in the sense that it evolves faster than you might be aware of, and then you're sort of caught unaware when you're in the moment, out in the landscape, or before the figure, and you're thinking that, oh, well, I'm going to approach it with sort of this system that's developed, you know, through these series of encounters, and then all of a sudden you find that system isn't cutting it. It's not working. It's not doing what it was doing before. And so it's sort of like you're grasping for something that is able to deliver something that has, you know, that can meet the need of this evolved idea or understanding of it, you know.
This is, Brian, this is amazing. This is the real meat of what it means to be a painter. I feel like there's many different kinds of painters, and none of them should be discounted. But a painter like myself, and from what you've said, I'm assuming like yourself, you've just explained, if it's possible to explain, a little bit of that complex process that occurs. Like at undergrad, I had a terrible time with my tutors, you know, because they would say, but what are your paintings about?
Right.
You know? And I would I'd say, I'm just trying to paint what I see, you know, which is a terrible answer. It's like, they don't want to hear that, you know? They want to hear that, oh, I'm trying to express what it's like to be a northern working class idiot and, you know, feel deprived. I don't know what. They expect some sort of concept-driven output. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And well, first of all, I did have to learn to observe things and paint them. But even, I remember I did a painting for my undergrad that was like vulnerable. It was a self-portrait in the clothes that my dad's cousin in Ireland would wear. He was a farmer. So I came from that kind of background, Irish farming background. But I was stood in the life room with these antique casts and the model stand, you know what I mean? And the clothes didn't fit. They deliberately did not fit, right? So I'm stood in this awkward, vulnerable pose. And so it was meaningful. You know, it's like, how can somebody from this background, who has nobody in my family are artists or musicians or anything like that, you know what I mean? They're all engineers or farmers. And it's like, what am I doing here? Basically, the question is, doing here? Well, I couldn't have even explained it as clear as that when I painted it. You know what I mean? Because it was a visual manifestation of an internal situation. And because I couldn't explain it, I just said, well, I'm just painting myself. And they go, but it's got to mean something. And it's like, it comes through a process. I always think that the meaning comes in the back door, you know? You've got to leave the back door open. But you can't invite it in the front door. It's never going to come in. You know, it's too formal. It's too shy. You've got to set up the parameters, the possibilities for meaning of some form to come into the work. First of all, you got to do the work. Like if you sit there and think about it all day, it's never going to happen. And you've got to set up the technical situations that you find interesting, whether it be the color or scale or format or whatever. And then you put something down and you realize that that doesn't do it for me. Therefore, I've got to change it or add something or take something away. Often for me, it's the figure. For me, the figure is the most potent vehicle for getting at the heart of what it means to be human. You know, Rembrandt was the epitome of that. And so sometimes I find myself, I mean, it's just madness. I'm here in the studio on my own and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm trying to make a pose to draw, to put it in a painting. And it might even be the painting of a woman, I don't know, but it's like, I've got to get that particular angle to say what I'm trying to say. And if somebody came in and said, well, what are you trying to say? I was like, I don't know. But afterwards, like a month later, it'll be like, obviously. It's so obvious afterwards. It's like in your face obvious. So much so that you put it on the gallery wall and you feel like your soul is on there and people are going to come along and say, Norman, you really got those thoughts, you know? And it's like, but you've explained it so beautifully, that thing of I'm going to listen back to what you said. And you said something about desire. You know, it doesn't come from concept in a logical or intellectual sense. It comes from desire. And that's where it leads then. It leads to concept.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because desire is something that is associated so often with something that is like sexual or sexualized or like erotic, you know. And there's an even kind of like a type of love that is described as erotic, like eros, you know, but it doesn't necessarily imply something that is sexual. It implies something that is a deep kind of burning from within, and that's the kind of desire that I'm talking about. You know, it's like this something that is it generates its own momentum and it has its own combustibility, right? And it's sort of like this, if it's not neglected, but if you make room for it, and it does require like a suffering, because it's not something that you can always impart. And for me, it's rarely, I'm rarely able to quench it immediately. In fact, I hardly ever quench it. And in fact, I really can't quench it through painting, which is why like other aspects of the way that I live become so important, because it's like they provide channels for this energy to be released, you know. And like music is really big for me. I play a lot. I compose a lot of music, and that's a very immediate way of getting something out, but it doesn't have the same effect for me that it would be for, say, someone who's devoted their life to music and songwriting, right? Because of the prolonged and agonizing process and all of the suffering that is involved in that, which is how we experience our process as painters and developing through our work, where it's like we have this ardent, burning desire that is propelling us into action. And because if we stay in a place of inaction, we will burn up. And or the fire goes out, and that's a tragedy, right?
Mm.
So it compels us to act, and the action is the search. It's like the striving. It's with yearning and terrible, agonizing anticipation, and the suffering of not meeting that desire. It's so much suffering, and it's something that is fought for. So it's like this. I mean, it's you know, and it can be violent. I mean, for me, it's a violent struggle. You know, where it can really tear me apart if I'm not careful. You know, or if I let myself get carried away, like I won't eat. You know, I won't like drink. I get so consumed. I really enter into like a different world, you know, and that created problems for me big time, especially when as a younger painter, you know, after grad school and working through my stuff on my own and starting a family, and you know, just, you know, even like being under 10, like I haven't quite made the decade mark as a husband and wife, you know, I'm still sort of like figuring this out. We just had a baby and all this stuff, and I'm just so consumed and so involved with painting, and you know, it's like the rest of everything just didn't have a place that my painting did, and that was a big problem that I've over the years I've had to learn to find balance with that, and I've had to learn to burn, and to endure it, and to allow that, instead of it being this like quickly met resolution, I allow it to be prolonged. I allow it to be stalled, and it creates pain, but it's a pain that becomes a source of motivation, to move me, to propel me into something that is action oriented, where I make and I create and I destroy, you know, and that's where the evolution occurs, you know.
Yeah, Brian, you've got an incredible gift, not just as a painter, but as an understander of those internal mechanisms that work. And what you've said just in the last sort of 5 minutes, it could be perceived, you know, if somebody who's not an artist and who doesn't believe in this thing at all were to listen to you, you could be accused of being a real nut job, you know?
Oh yeah, sure.
But,
yeah.
Well, I want to be on the other end of that and say, no, I agree completely with everything you said. Completely. You know, you're not a nut job, or if you are, at least there's two of us, because you know, I can be. So just at the end of last year, I took a gallery on for 2 months, my own gallery, and so like I had on a week and a half beforehand, and then a week and a half afterwards. And so it's like almost 3 months without really getting to my paintings. And there was a lot of things happened, you know, trying to set up 3 exhibitions, and, you know, cars breaking down and house being replastered, and, you know, all this sort of stuff happening all at once. But nothing tipped me over the edge like the fact that I didn't get to do my work for almost 3 months. And it's a good experience. Yeah. Because I look back on it, and sometimes I think, you know what, really? Do I have to do this thing? Like, could I not really just man up and get a proper job? You know, we've got a family to support. Just stop messing around. But I know now, you know, that I can't do without this. Like you say, you can hold it off. You can hold it off for a week, maybe two. But it's just knocking at the door every day. It's always there.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when I come into the studio now, I do not come into the studio with this idea, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do this painting that's going to be like one I've done before that somebody liked, or I've seen somebody else do this, I'm going to do this great painting that's as good as that, or I don't come in with any of that. I come in here, I put the music on, I get a coffee, I don't think. I start to move around, put the paint on the palette, just look through some drawings, just pick up a panel, put it on, just move. And then for me, success is if I can not think enough to actually get some of that paint on a brush and put it on something. That's success, because you know, like you and me, we know a lot about painting, not being silly. Like we spent our lives looking at paintings and even talking to great painters. And so we have all that with us present. So it's not an easy thing to then say, I'm going into this game with Bonnard, with Velasquez, with Matisse. Like I'm entering the game. Like, who do we think we are? If you think about it, you go, no way, you know, I'll play tiddlywinks, but I ain't playing that game. So I don't like. I hardly plan paintings. I hardly think about. You know, I don't be too ambitious. If I can get something done, if I can kick something forward, then that's a good thing. But I need that. You know, it's an essential thing.
Yeah, I mean I have a lot of I share similarities in that process, because I tend to I get in my own way if I allow myself to, when it comes to painting and or you know, developing a painting. I can think or overanalyze or become too objective, and I miss the pulse of the painting, and it's easy for me to, like, you know, if I'm to perform any type of surgery, it's easy for me to hit an artery and just watch it die out, like, in front of me, you know. So I do better when I respond more intuitively and incorporate, like, really pay attention to my instincts and give attention to my sensibilities, you know. And
can I just ask you what for you? It's a word you use a lot, and I've heard other people use it. So, what does sensibilities mean for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. So I have to preface it with this. I was introduced to the idea of sensibilities when I read a book by Camille Pissarro, and it's a collection of his letters that he wrote to his son Lucien, who was an artist. And so it was like an artist talking to an artist, but it was also like an older generation. It's like George Nick talking with you, you know. And if George Nick were to write you letters frequently, that just sort of detailed his own process and his thoughts and things that he was working through, it would in time reveal this beautiful evolution, his evolution as a painter, and as a person, and all the more if you were his son, right? Yeah. And so like there's this incredible vein of vulnerability and honesty and transparency that we have access to from Camille Pissarro, who was a student of Corot and just a fantastic painter, you know, and worked with Cezanne.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I've just written. I've got to read those letters. Pissarro is a huge, huge. I just love his work. And
Me
that
too.
relationship with Cezanne, I'm almost obsessed with it. Like how
Yeah,
they
yeah.
remain distinct as painters, and yet, I mean, the structures in Pissarro, the structuring of the picture, they look so naturalistic,
Yeah.
and yet they're not. They're
Yeah.
structured,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and yet, and Cezanne took that structure further, definitely,
Hmm.
like more abstract, more flat, more structured. But the fact that they had such respect for each other, they worked side by side,
Hmm.
and one is the father of modern art, and one is, obviously highly regarded, but he's like, oh, he's a naturalistic painter.
Hmm.
It's just so fascinating. I just love that. Anyway, so I've written down. I must look at his letters. So you
Yeah.
carry on. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Yes. Well, what's interesting too, real quick, is that you know, Cezanne obviously wanted to study with Pissarro because Pissarro was so highly regarded, in his own day, so highly regarded as a painter, and made plenty of money with it. Although sometimes his wife didn't think so. But they did well for themselves, well enough. And what's so amazing is that when Cezanne would go and work with Pissarro, they shared such similar values, right? And so they both were sort of in this pursuit of wanting to paint into their own nature. And so they went into nature to find their nature, and sort of discarding and sort of disrobing what they had been adorned with through academia and classical training and rigor and all that stuff. They just tossed it out. You toss it out, but you don't lose it.
Yeah.
You carry it with you. But you toss out the stuff. You toss out perhaps maybe the ruling of it, the dominance, the authority, right? The authoritative position that it takes, um, uh, unrightfully so. And so, for them to sort of dismantle that and to go out into nature naked, in a sense, vulnerable, as artists, they have no other alternative, because of how they're approaching nature, to come out of nature, um, without understanding who they are as artists, as people, as humans, and really that's how they establish the relationship to nature. The way that they related to nature and cultivated that relationship was mirrored, in their aesthetic, in their instincts, and their sensibilities. Essentially, is the informed, directive, or the informed director or governor of their nature, of their aesthetic, of their instincts. And that's how I think about sensibilities. So when I talk about sensibilities, I'm really talking about my nature as a painter, my instincts, my values, and it's really amazing when that desire is allowed to have access to those sensibilities. It's amazing things happen, and I think that's why automatism was so important to a lot of painters in like the mid 20th century, because mid to late 20th centuries, because like the idea of sort of getting out of the way, so to speak, right? The ego, the critical self, like, sort of like just sort of being a vessel that things like archetypes and you know uh, you know thousands upon thousands of years of humanity sort of somehow encoded in our DNA is able to usher forth and you know, inform the shapes that are made and how they're made, and you know, the expression or gesture of a mark, or the velocity of a line, or you know, and or the application of a color, and like, you know, these things were really important, and overemphasized, but necessarily so because of how de-emphasized it had been, right? Um, and so like it's a natural response to overemphasize something that really should have been present all along and supported, but because it wasn't, they were like, well, forget that, we're going to go all the way with it, you know, and see how far we can take it. But I feel like, you know, when I look at someone like Cezanne, who really did end up influencing Pissarro a great deal in terms of how he conceptualized pictorial space and his visual world, man. You know, Cezanne had a huge impact, and vice versa. You know, it was a wonderful partnership that they had in exchange. But so they, it seems like to me, especially with someone like Cezanne, he found a way to incorporate all of it and to evolve through it, while not seeking to preserve any one thing per se, but it remained intact, and it stayed. The preservation was, in fact, it was the evolution. It was because it could evolve that it was preserved, and it was protected, so to speak, because of the measure of integrity that he used, that he implemented within that process.
What is it that was protected? Sorry, I just missed that point. What is it that was protected?
His automatism,
right?
His ability to allow things just to usher forth and come through.
Yeah.
His sensibilities, his nature, his instincts, and even in the way that he began to, you know, because he began to create systems, to form systems, which every painter does, you know, and of course they weren't fixed, but they themselves evolved as a natural result of those other things evolving, right? Because those other things, those components are what informed the system, right? And so that all of it was, he found a way to he found a way to evolve through it while keeping all of it preserved and intact, and without you know, certainly without selling out, you know, and which is, I think, a very difficult thing for many painters, you know, because look, you know, at the end of the day, we are trying to, yes, we're making work, but we're also wanting to survive, you know, and not just us, but we're, you know, like you and me, like we want to provide for our families. And so I've had that talk to myself, like, come on, Brian, like go into, you know, I guess, get a suit and tie and go into a formal job and get it done. But I have done that. And I was in a world of depression. I was actually depressed, man.
Yeah.
And but that's a whole different story. And it actually has a really cool, like something really cool happened. And I'll have to share that with you at some time. But yeah. It was.
Wow, yeah. Yeah. Wow, there's so much there. So first of all, to Cezanne, like, you know, obviously I've been looking at Cezanne's work for years, and every time it's an exhibition, I thought there was a great one in Philly when I was studying there, and then just more recently there's one in London. But every time I see a Cezanne show or a Cezanne painting, it's like, it's just like crazy, this guy, you know, he's like, there's so much in them. Yeah. And in his work in general and in specific pieces, so much in there. And I know that every time I see his work, I will learn from it, and I will learn a lot. But there's no way he's going to reveal all his secrets at once. You know, right. It's little bits over the years that you get from him, and so enigmatic. And then what was your other point? Oh, your other point was like the selling out point, you know. And I think I find myself on a very shaky footing over the last few years because, you know, I think there's a kind of security to be able to paint realistically because anybody can come along and say, oh wow, you know, I mean, we all know that feeling from like being at school and you're the best drawer in the class and somebody says, oh, Norman's a good drawer, and it's like, oh, that feels nice, you know. And that continues. It's very important. It was very important to me. But now I look at what I'm doing, like you said, you're using your instincts more, using your sensibilities. It's like, that's a bit of an airy-fairy word. Like, you know, you're going to work, you're going to use your sensibilities. What does that mean? And whereas if I did realistic paintings, the guy who, you know, delivers something could come in and go, oh, wow, that's great, man. But now I feel that they're going to look at it and say, oh, you're one of those messy artists. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I'm not an intellectual or anything like this. You know, I'm just a guy who likes painting. But now that I find myself in this world of where my sensibilities are an important part of what I do every day, and I find my paintings getting messier and less realistic and thicker paint, like just piling on the paint, you know, saving it in tubs and throwing it on. I mean, there's probably, I'm not even looking at myself, there's probably some abstract paintings up the top there. Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not finished paint. I'm never showing those things, but they're like maybe underpaintings. But someday I'm going to think, that's okay, I might leave that. So I might even be doing abstract paintings. And so I'm thinking, this is crazy because I've been able to sell realistic paintings. And now I'm just going into this world of madness. But it's great because now I've got a buddy who knows about this madness and
welcome to
is even able to explain it, for goodness sake.
Well, you know, it's interesting, man. Because I had a similar journey. You know, I think coming out of graduate school and sort of having a couple of years to develop the work, I developed into this you know, way of working, and which was a genuine expression of my interests, you know, at the time. And but many of them were kind of borrowed interests, you know, adopted. And but I, you know, I found a resonance within them in some sense. So I pursued it, and then I began to get a lot of positive response to that, you know, from collectors and people buying the work and things like that. And then everything just changed, like so much so, and so drastically so, that my relationship to the material changed, my relationship to space and shape, all the pictorial excuse me, have a step. Remember before I had that shake?
Yeah.
Just got caught, like a seed got caught in my throat. Anyway, that's supposed to be a health shake, man, and it's not doing its job right now.
Here's Brian. He died of a health shake.
Right. That's such the American way. But anyway, so but everything changed, and as a painter, I you know, on the surface, I regressed tremendously. So I went backwards big time. And it was because the visual, like the expression that I was using, like the vernacular for that visual expression, was not able to contain the magnitude of what I began to experience. And so I had to find a new way of articulating through the material and a new way of arranging things visually, to begin to kind of point to this reality that I was experiencing, which had drastically changed. And it was because my ideas were changing, and not to my own merit, but to the work and the merit of other painters. And one very influential thinker and painter was Stanley Lewis, who I know has meant a great deal to many people, and people, other painters associated within that vein of painting and thinking. And I realized that as I followed the path of that, backwards into the history of painting, it went all the way to the beginning. And I was very surprised by that. And it flowed through these, you learn in art history, these movements that seem to happen sort of in these isolated ways, but it flowed through these seemingly isolated, encapsulated movements and connected them all together. This, and it helped me to understand painting in a way that I'd never had before, and to access paintings. I found these like sort of hidden doors in paintings that were put in there by the painters, and for painters, and to be able to access these paintings on deeper levels. And it changed everything. But it also changed the way that I painted. But there was no technique. There was no like formula that could be used to do this. I had to start from the ground up and really find my way through it. And I have been ever since really late 2012. But things began to coalesce in 2015. And ever since then, it's been like evolving, up to this point. Still not coming close to what my reality is. But we were talking about Morandi earlier. Morandi has this wonderful quote. He says, "There is nothing more abstract than reality." And that, at first I thought, when I was first introduced to that technique many years ago, I thought it was a bit tongue in cheek, but now, because of what I've experienced and what I've been going through, like that was it was him giving us like something like that was a gift. That quote is a gift because it's true. And it in of itself is a doorway. It's an invitation to something much grander and greater. So that has dramatically altered my path as a painter, and how I had to be willing to sacrifice all that, all those levels of acceptance and all those good things that come with making paintings that sell, but the painting.
So this sounds like a really important story, and that I've watched some of your videos online, but I've not seen, apart from I've written down some quotes that you attribute to Stanley Lewis, and those are obviously significant to you. But you need to do it. You need to do the full story, because no, honestly, I think. As far as I know, nobody's interviewed you like in depth properly about this. I'm only guessing from what you said that this new approach was, first of all, based on like a surrender to nature, putting yourself in front of it and in a sense surrendering to it, but also to the abstraction of it. And also, I know that you're incredibly sensitive to space. In your analysis of other artists' works, I would tend to be more excited by the color, but you have this ability to see, recessive areas and areas that are coming forward and so forth. And So how many? That's all I can interpret from what you've said about this evolution, this change. Yeah, that's a story that needs to be told. That's. I'll come back next week. I'll interview you properly. And
hey, let me know when you're in the States, man. It'd be good to meet up.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this summer we'll be over there. So yeah.
Great. Well, that's one thing I love about Bonnard, and I know that you had mentioned Bonnard at some point earlier, and I know that Bonnard is important to your work. He's very important to my work too, and I feel like Bonnard, for him, color is something that, I mean, color is many things to Bonnard, but one thing certainly is the way that he is able to construct space, and the dynamics of space through these color relationships, and like, texture and pattern and things like that, color within color, and like air and atmosphere, chromatic atmosphere, and he seems to like be able to create chromatic like zones within the painting, and I think of them as like zones, not necessarily as like points of division, but like these very specific spaces that have intentional locations within the much larger construct of the painting that are subject to change when the eye of the viewer picks up another color, or like another zone, or another area in the painting. Like these things begin to shift, they begin to change, and like there's a real sort of like Hans Hofmann talks about like paintings breathing, like there's like an inhale and an exhale. I think about lungs expanding and contracting, and things move forward, things move back in the painting. So there's like a receding, and there's like things become salient, and it's like this sort of vitality to and these dynamic qualities to this like painting. This painting becomes this interactive, like moving image with a pulse, with vitality, with life, and that is, to me, like his ability to do that reflects something that I encounter, when I'm in nature, when I'm painting on location, that I have not found a way to really access while on location. I try to work into, when I come back in the studio, and sort of rely on visual memory and imagination, and sort of like sensibilities and things like that, and then the painting becomes the subject, removed from the natural subject, and so new rules apply, and like new realities are observed. But Picasso critiqued Bonnard because of his inability, as he perceived it, as Picasso perceived it, his inability to choose. Mm-hmm. But I think Picasso misunderstood Bonnard's choices. I think Picasso, he was a freaking genius, of course, but like the way that he related to pictures and picture making was something, it was like the complete opposite end of how Bonnard did, But of course Bonnard's making decisions, he's making choices, of course he is, but he has there's so much duality in the work. One thing doesn't remain as one thing, it becomes something completely other. It's like, you look at a Chardin and you can trust it. And you look at a Bonnard still life, and it's more than a still life. It transcends beyond it, and it becomes something completely different, and the energy is so much grander. than just like a typical still life. And I'm not saying Chardin makes typical still lives by any means, but I'm not, you know, saying that Bonnard's a greater painter than Chardin necessarily, but I'm just saying in the sense of like the tradition of still life painting or figurative painting in general, there's something that is incredibly transcendental about Bonnard's work that, right, it points to something beyond it.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I learned to paint from a logical point of view, and so in Chardin, there's almost, you could say, it's the high point of tonal still life painting. You know, it works as an incredibly structured pattern of shapes, just gorgeous, you know, and then the form of the objects and the sense of the light and reflected light and the texture of the pen, all those things, you know. And so all that I can logically analyze and understand, you know, the light side, the dark side. You look at a Bonnard still life, and it's every rule that I've taught myself is broken. Not just one rule, not just five, every single rule about the way light behaves, about what should be in the foreground, the background, or what about, you know, perspective, about it's just madness about color. You know, you shouldn't put that color next to that color or that color on top of that color. It's like every rule is broken, and yet it has this presence, you know, this undeniable brilliance of light and presence and form and space. And it's like, you know, it's I do copies of Matisse and copies of Bonnard, and it's just like, I don't know what, I don't even sometimes learn anything from them because they're just so unfathomable. How, you know, why those choices were made, there's no logic that I can figure out. No rules. But it's really great because your perception, if I'm not mistaken, is a lot to do with this spatial effect. And like I did an online course with Zoe Frank, and she's always on about that, you know, this book by William Dunning, and she's working through it and stuff. And it's like, but it's that thing of desire. Like for me, I see color in Bonnard, and I fall in love. And it's like, oh, you know, just like open my heart to it all, like the whole thing. And then somebody start talking about space in a painting, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, I can sort of see that if I really look for it, but it doesn't make my heart beat fast. You know, it doesn't excite me in that visceral way that light and color just means everything to me. You know, I go painting on a gray day, and I'm like, I'm out with the guys painting. I'm like, oh, I'm painting on a gray day. I'm like, oh, I'm just painting, and I'm just painting, and then the sun comes out, and I can feel it. Like suddenly my heart is faster. Suddenly I was like, I'm putting the paint on, I'm responding, and it's just crazy. You know, I don't deliberately. I was like, I should be able to paint on a gray day. I mean, every good painter can paint on a gray day, but you know what? Anyway. So it's really cool when people like you can see that space, and obviously are excited about it, and you fold it into your own work, and I see that. But this is the question I wanted to ask you, is or even just to say that one of the things I love about your say project, your painting project, everything you're doing in painting, is that it encompasses all the stuff. Like it's landscape, but it's also figure painting, you know? And that's really rare. Normally you get a landscape painter who puts like an indication of the presence of a figure in it, or you get a figure painter who might put some background in. But it seems like the people in your paintings are people. They're not figures, like incidental figures. They're people. And I like how they're hidden sometimes, like a Bonnard hides people in his paintings too. And that's really cool. I've always struggled to do that. and I admire that. But so I wanted to ask you about, how do you put people in your paintings?
I spent a lot of time working with a figure. So after graduate school, I began teaching at the University of South Carolina. I taught figure drawing there. At that time, they had 2 levels of it, and they were really generous, and they gave me the freedom to develop the curriculum for those 2 levels. And it certainly was a reflection of my own interests and what I felt like would be beneficial for the students. But it benefited my work tremendously. Though at the time I wasn't fully aware, as just actually I wasn't aware at all really as to how much it would have benefited my work. But I would spend, hours drawing from the figure, hours posing the figure. And I actually really enjoy posing the figure. I really enjoy it. Because it's a way, to me, it's very much like sculpting, and I do like sculpture. I mean, I like sculpture, and I enjoy sculpting. Something, I'm not good at it, which is kind of unfortunate, but I enjoy manipulating the space and the energy of the space, and so the articulation of a form in space and the presence of like a energy within that gesture, it really affects the quality of the space, or I should say, it affects the expression of the space around that form. Because space is, as I understand it, is not just one continuous thing, but it's a composite of many different things. And they have, we could say, volumes, right? We could say that space is a composite of volumes, in a sense. And each volume has its own level of potential energy, in terms of how it is affected by a form that is visible, or solid, and how it affects the solid visible form. And so posing a figure in space, to me, is a pure delight, because I'm playing with multiple forms, not just the form of the figure, but the forms that surround the figure. And the energy of the space can change dramatically because of that, as a result. And so that's something that I didn't realize that I was developing in myself as a teacher, but and as someone who just kept doing this on a daily basis. But it allowed me to become very sensitive to these realities, and so having spent so much time posing and working with the figure, all different types, all different ages, and it was really amazing. Studying the skeletal system and musculature and the morphology of these things helped me immensely to paint them in a way that I think characteristically fits into this painterly world that I've been developing. And I love how I think you're the first person that's expressed it that way, and I love it. You said that they're people; they're not just figures, but they're people, and that's how I view them. I really view them as having their own psychology, their own story, their own impact, contribution to the painting, and the way that it informs the painting. And so they, whether the face is shown or not, the expression of the pose, the gesture of the pose is paramount to the entirety of the painting and the understanding of the painting. And so the landscape and the space that surrounds the figure, for me, is inseparable to the figure itself, even though I don't paint them at the same time. For me to, in a sense, for me to understand the figure, the presence of the figure, and how the figure is to be present, I tend to first paint or create the space that the figure will exist in. And then things happen, like, the figure is introduced, then it might be altered. If the tone is right, like an emotional tone or something, or a psychological tone or spiritual tone, there's this charge that happens, this sort of third thing that happens where visually the symbol of the figure and the symbol of the landscape sort of take on these roles, these supporting roles, to sort of symbolically represent something that is beyond them, and that is the heart of my experience, and that's really what I'm after in capturing in my paintings.
That's fantastic. That's a good answer. However, I also want to probe you on the very practical thing of, are they pretty much invented? If you're working outside and you see a figure, do you make any sort of annotation about scale or position or anything like that? Or how do you practically go about involving people in your paintings?
They're all invented. Although, I rely heavily upon visual memory, which is something that I've spent time developing and strengthening, because I love observing, and I just love observing, because there's so much to see, and there's so much that is greater than me, that I'm surrounded by, and to observe these things is to have the freedom to observe these things is such a gift, so observing is really important to me. And so to observe and to remember, but when I remember, the remembrance is something that is combined with imagination and play. Mm-hmm. It's combined with my sensibilities and my nature as a painter, and it's combined with my desires. And so even if I see a figure, like there's many times I'm out in these places, the many figures, people about, they're just doing their thing, but I'll see like in the corner of my eye. And it's funny because oftentimes the things I see in the corner of my eye are the things that really stick.
Yeah.
Oddly enough. But I'll see something that I just love. But obviously they can't sit there and pose. So I have to sort of immediately access the essence of that. And sort of recall that, or hold on to it, and then sort of work it into the painting, which is often the case. And sometimes I'll hold on to a moment like that for months, years even, and it's really funny how something can change given the amount of time required to initiate those changes, because certainly there are certain sort of biases that occur from just life and the the culmination of experience, how one thing will just sort of be added onto the next, and that begins to inform how things are remembered. And it's so exciting and wonderful. So figures appear like that, and they appear in ways that are really, they're meant to sharpen or clarify the narrative, or sometimes obscure it in a way, like maybe not obscure, but enshroud, in a sense, and that's important for me sometimes. Sometimes it takes a long time for figures to really. I have this one painting that I like a lot, but it's not resolved, and I can't show it because of it. And so, but I know there's a figure. I know there's a figure waiting at the door of that painting, and I just haven't had yet the courage to like really let that figure in and like allow it to explore the space of that painting. So that's been sitting on my wall for like over a year, you know. And sometimes I just leave them at the door to make sure they really want to be in there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Other times I invite them in, and they stay for a coffee or a tea, and then they leave. And sometimes
it's cool. That's a really wonderful thing. I mean, it's unexpected. I don't have that kind of visual memory to hold on to even the scale of a figure, for that long. So that's really a remarkable.
Well, you can develop it though. You really can. I promise,
Yeah.
man. Because my memory is to pot. I mean, it's like it's no good, but you really can develop it, man. It's and it's funny because the painter who really got me serious about it was Leon Kossoff. And yeah. So Kossoff would we'd go on a walkabout every morning, and he'd take a sketchbook with him and just draw these things that he would see, and things that would interest him, come back to the studio and paint from his drawings. He's like huge paintings that were like so demanding, and that were just like just ridiculous in terms of how much he had to put himself into it for these things to exist. And and yet he relied on these drawings to supply what he needed to make these paintings, and his visual memory. And he would, and I remember reading something that he commented about that, and I was like, well, Leon was really serious about that. And I love the way that he paints figures, because to me they're people. Like they feel alive, like they have their own story, own, I just love the way he paints them. And so I figured, well, there has to be something to that, and it was so much in line with what I was wanting to do. So I was like, I'm going to start doing that too, and it's a balance, because if I stay too long without going back to the figure and working from the figure, like from life, then really weird things begin to happen to my figures, that I like. Sometimes I really like, and sometimes I'm really missing the mark, So I love the idea of being able to abstract a figure gesturally, and to sort of paint what I hope to be like this essential movement, or which holds a tone to it. It requires for me a lot of deliberate time spent with the figure in life, or thinking about the figure and working with it.
That's really cool. Leon Kossoff, I've not looked at his work a lot, I think it's like I was maybe indicated to you, like I use photography for my figures, particularly if they're big figures. And I know that I've talked to painters who don't use photography, and who say, well, it kind of restricts your ability to invent and all that sort of stuff. And I do invent, I'll move arms, I'll completely take heads off, and all sorts of stuff. But when I look at like Leon Kossoff's work, it's like you say, his figures are good, but in a very different way to photorealism or anything towards that end of the scale. And so, yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, because yours, your people in your paintings. Well, first of all, one thing I want to say is that they look playful, and I like that because I mean, you can't make these clear parallels between the character of a person and their work. You know, it never really ties up properly. But that really cool thing you did on the video where you're running up to your painting trying to surprise it. It's like this guy is so much fun, and you know, he's dealing with the in-depth issues of painting, but he's really fun too. And your people look playful. You know, they look like real people, and they look like fun people, and that's just fantastic because they're, you know, if you want to have people in your paintings, they're going to be fun people in your paintings.
Wait, so that means a lot, you know, and thank you for saying that, man. You know, it's yeah, I mean, sometimes they so a couple of things, like, so with Kossoff, his figures, to me, they work so well because they can exist in his world, you know, and the world that he paints. He found a way to paint. He found a way to allow figures to belong in that world, which is a feat, you know, in of itself. And like David Park is really good at that, you know. Stanley Spencer, and like they do it in all these different ways. Corot, right? And it's like, when sometimes I'll see a great painter, an amazing painter who will seek to incorporate something, you know, like a figure, multiple figures, and it just doesn't work because they haven't found a way to relate to the figure in the way that they do to other subjects, you know, and so, and that's a very difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to relate to multiple subjects in a way that allows them to exist in the same painterly world.
Yeah,
you know,
this is a huge subject. Like in my mind, this is the junction of figures and spaces, like landscape or interior or whatever. Like there was a thing with Philip Geiger recently, and he was talking about how for him, the figures in his interiors it's kind of like a still life. You know, he'll paint the space and then he'll think, well, I need a structure here, foreground, you know, creating the space with these figures. And then he mentioned Degas, and he said Degas was different in that everything started with the figure. The figure was the primal thing in his paintings, and the spaces and everything came out of the figure. And for me, like I had a show a few years ago called Only Human, because like it's funny because years ago when I was teaching, my students used to joke about it. They said Norman will never paint a landscape in his life. Like, and now I paint a lot of landscapes, and I love it because, you know, it's a community thing and it's fun and it's nice to be on space. I prefer the city, to be honest. Anyway, but for me, the figure is the central focus of it all, and all builds out from the figure. But this thing that you're doing of creating real, believable felt spaces with real, believable figures, people in harmony, in the same world. It's like, wow, that's rare. That's really rare to be able to do that.
Well, you know, so there are times when I'll come across a painter who strikes, like who somehow in this sort of uncanny way will like be able to paint a landscape and a figure in such a way as they don't even seem like they're really that different from one another. You know, and when I come across that, like my question is why? Like why is there not that clear boundary that distinguishes like one type of form from, or entity from another. And it's way beyond the visual representation of it. It really comes down to, like, I believe, like, the way that the artist understood the connection between the figure to what was around it. So like Lucian Freud is someone who I feel like is really good at that. So Lucian Freud will paint these figures in these interior spaces, but the interior spaces never feel separate from the figure to me. They always feel like an extension of the figure, like an expression of the state of the figure. And so, like, the space around the figure is the other figure, or a grouping of figures. And so it's like the whole, like, so it's like the way that Freud would consider a human, like a person, would be such that he would consider them in such a way as to access them at a very deep level. And that's why I feel like the psychology comes through so powerfully in his work, but he also would allow, or I think he would seek or work to there's an energy that every person has that seems to affect the space around them, and a part of that is, I feel, is the psychology of the figure, the psychological expression. And that's why I think, like, the poses are so important that Freud chooses with his figures. And so he'll have a figure that's, say, reclining or something, but they're reclining in a very specific way, and the tone of that pose, and the tone of the gesture of the forms, and the way that he treats the touch of the flesh, and the way that he treats the hair, and the way that he treats the expression of the face, and how he paints the way that a hand will touch the bedding, or a couch, or a rat, or like the floor, or the way that a foot will touch the floor. It's like he's moving from a foot to the floor, but for him, he's moving from the foot to another torso, or an extension of that same figure. And so it's like they feel they really kind of share that energy. And so, like, I really never feel like I always feel like the space around the figures are extensions of the figure. And so the figure becomes so big and so powerful in that way that it fills the entirety of the painting, and even beyond. Like, he does it so powerfully that it extends beyond the painting. It stays with me. Like, I can turn my back to the painting, I still feel it, No, I don't feel like I do that in my work, not even close. But I do seek. I became aware of it from painters like that, and because it's important to me, I really seek to do that in my own work. Hopper is one who does that really well. And I feel like David Park does that very well. Even someone like De Kooning. I feel like De Kooning, gosh, man, the way that he works into a figure and through a figure, and he would work into a figure and through a figure, so that the figure just would extend throughout the whole painting. And Bernard does that, too, and in a different way. And so yeah, I really work at that, and my own paintings. So it really is wonderful to hear that you are sensing that, occurring, and I know it's certainly a moderate level, but you know, especially compared to these other guys. But like, it's good to know that even to know that you're sensing that is really wonderful. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, no, it's working really well. I mean, I had this conceptual idea a little while ago that how can we combine the sense of our internal world and the external world, in the sense that, you know, I used to do a lot of portraits, but then the body, the action of the body is also important. So then that's on another scale, you know. And then, but if you look at a person next to a building, you know, that means the person has to be tiny, unless you've got a 75-foot canvas. You know, how do you get the portrait and the figure and the building and the space and the landscape? Like, this is all our world. Our world is not just a view, you know.
Right.
The world is our internal reality, our physical reality, and the space. So, like, I mean, I had this trite solution where you do a portrait, and then you do a figure painting, and then you do a landscape painting, and they're all one, like it's triptychs, but it's like it, you know, doesn't even work as a solution. But, you know, because the problem is the problem of scale, you know, the scale of the head, the scale of the body, and the scale of the world. It's, you know.
Yeah. But okay.
I'm thinking of it in simplistic terms. That solution is just ridiculous. But these organic solutions where, you know, like you're combining, and I like what you said about, you know, de Kooning. I love de Kooning. Just, oh goodness,
yeah,
it's just great to, I don't know, yeah, like the fleshiness of those strokes, and it's so slippy. Like, I was listening to a Zoe Frank interview the other day, and she said that even when she goes pretty much to abstraction, she has to treat the mark as if she was maybe painting an arm or some physical form. Because if she just treats it as an abstract mark or shape, it loses its sort of energy. It just becomes this gratuitous shape. And that really struck me, because I've been trying to work abstractly a little bit. And I'm just awful at it, like terrible, you know? Just really bad.
Yeah, I understand.
And it's depressing. Like, I should be able to make one good abstract painting. You'd think I'd be able to manage it. And I don't know why I even bother. I mean, why am I even bothering? If I'm so bad at it, why am I even trying? I don't know, but that, anyway. So de Kooning is just a miracle of keeping absolute aliveness, and yet sensuous color and mark and everything. I don't know how it does that.
Yeah.
But I like what you said. It's like the figure is almost exploding into the world.
Yeah.
Crazy, isn't it? Artists are crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where, well, I wanted to comment earlier about what you said, you know, with like the scale and perspective and something like that, you know. Well, it's like what you were saying earlier, you know. It's like you were saying how there is like you were commenting on the internal reality, the internal world, and how we experience things, which of course is very different than it's different than what the schematics that we were introduced to, especially as like you know, young artists and painters and things like that, can express, can give us. So, for example, you know, if we have like classical perspective, or, you know, scientific perspective, you know, everything is fixed, and in relation to this horizon line, and in relation to the position of the viewer, and this sort of like, you can locate where these things are depending on, you know, like the orthogonals that that describe where something ends, where something begins, and where those you know, intersect on that horizon line, and so everything is able to be located. Everything is fixed, and it's all, and one thing relates to something else in a perfect sort of ratio of scale, and you know, which is dependent upon distance and these fixed positions. But we really don't see like that. You know, we don't. Our visual experience, the way that we experience the world, our environment, the way that we move through a street or a room, you know, is not like that, because things like so in our minds, space is constantly being constructed and reconstructed, and it's this process of like making and remaking and making and remaking and unmaking, and we sort of arrive at this composite acceptance of what the space is and how to make sense of it and what it's doing. But the mind engages with the space in a way that is very dynamic, where this idea of a fixed position doesn't exist, not even as the viewer, because we're moving. We are moving in an ever mobile space, right? We are moving in a mobile space, and so like nothing is fixed, essentially, right? So perspective does us a great service, and in fact, in the way that it fixes everything. So we can take a breath and be like, okay, we're going to build this space, and this is here, and this is here, and it's going to relate to this horizon line and these orthogonals and points of convergence, and then we're going to be good. It's going to be okay, you know, and everything will be ratio, like, you know, scale will be established by distance, all this kind of stuff, and that's fine, as long as we understand what it is and what it's giving us and what we can take from it. And it's also fine because there are wonderful ways to break it, you know, to deconstruct that sort of schematic and sort of provide a new context for it in a sense. And so, you know, you can affirm one aspect of that schematic while negating another, and then finding a way to make it work, which is what Bernard does all the time in his work. It's full of contradictions that end up being the very thing that leads to the resolution of the painting, which is part of the reason why it's so confusing and like undeniable. And, you know, and it stays with us, it sticks with us, it haunts us in a sense, you know. But so getting back to this question of, well, how would one, like, you know, paint the portrait and the figure and the building and get all of this in sort of one picture? How does it even happen, you know? And that's a great question. It's a good question.
Well, it occurs to me, like, I keep looking at the figure on the beach just behind you there, and I don't think that's typical in your work, and it feels like we're kind of floating above the figure, you know, and I've seen that perspective in your work quite a bit. And who's that guy? He's wrote this book, Methodologies or somebody, a book about drawing, and it's from New York, and one of the drawing things was like, you know the one.
Yeah.
One of the exercises, like, draw from memory an experience, draw an experience from memory, and I found myself doing those exercises, and it would always be from that viewpoint, from, you know, like the corner of the room, or or above looking down. And it gives a sense of, in a sense, that's how we, I don't know if that's visually how we remember things, but it gives a sense of you're not grounded, you're not sort of present on the land, you're sort of floating in this mind space above and looking down. I remember years ago being on the street in Preston doing a painting of the street, and I was like, oh, I just don't like it. I don't like these diagonals and the fact that, you know, people are, you got a person there who's hiding behind a person there, and everything's hidden. I just don't like it. I'm just gonna change it. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea. But when I look at the painting now, I realized that I was imagining myself floating higher and higher to get a higher viewpoint so you could see recession in space, you know? And it's quite obvious now what I was doing, but at the time I just thought people were looking at me like, what is this kid trying to do? Like imagining floating. And so you seem to, you find that elevated floating viewpoint in your work quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, it's, I think, as a result of you know, it's a result of, like, you know, trying to find a way to fit more into the format, you know, because I want to paint, like, I want to paint the range of my scope, of my field of vision, you know, but I can't do that. I can't do that in a straightforward way. And the funny thing is that I'm not conscious of this when I paint, and I haven't really spoken about this before. Actually, this is kind of the first time I'm thinking about it, but I do know that it's important. It's important. So when I'm painting, I'm looking ahead of me, but I'm also looking, like, around me. Like, I'm looking to, like, my left, my right. I'm looking up. I'm looking down, and what I experience when I do that is are these visual realities that inform what I see ahead of me, in front of me, you know. And so that's important to me. And so I guess I paint, or, you know, it's funny too, is that I'll look at something here, and so I'll start painting that, because I don't plan out my compositions ahead of time. So, like, I just kind of start, and so I'll paint this because I'm looking at this, and then I look up and I really like that, and so I'll start painting that, and then I'll look over here and I'll start painting that, and then it's like nothing fits, you know, like nothing's like it doesn't work, you know. And so I've got to, like, find these ways of, like, making it work. And but the funny thing is that because I'm painting from life on location, I'm really not actively thinking about these things. I'm just responding to these. I'm responding to these very spontaneous needs. You know, these demands, these spontaneous demands that arise from the visual experience. That's what it is. I'm just responding to the visual demands that arise from these from the visual experience, and it's incredibly spontaneous. And so I don't really have time to think about it, and because everything is changing, I just have to, like, pursue it. And whether it works or not is something that I consider later, you know, in the studio. And I let the paintings sit for a good while, you know, before I really engage with them, because I need the residual influence that comes from, you know, painting from life. I need that residual influence to sort of wane a little bit before I feel like I have the the freedom to like move in the painting and really respond to the painting.
That's great. This is the sort of stuff that needs to be out there, you know. That I was alarmed. I watched this short demo of you painting out at the Battery, and as far as I could see, you had a white canvas like this big, and then you started putting blue on. Blue, just blue. It's like, what is he doing? He's mad. It's like he's starting with this blob of color, and then where's he going to work from there? He's not planned it out. He's not drawn it out. He's just and yeah, of course, you know, when you look at your work, it is this full experience, looking down, looking left, looking right, looking up, you know. It's marvelous. I feel the same way when I go out painting. Like it's like, how much of this experience can I cram into this?
Yeah,
you know,
right.
And I'm trying to learn from Cezanne about that. I got this wonderful book, Cezanne's Composition. It has a photograph of the motif and the painting, and it's brilliant because you can spend all day walking around looking for this great motif. The motif is as boring as anything you've ever seen. You know, the photograph is just like, that is the most boring location you've ever seen. But what he does with it, you know, he combines, he squashes, he pushes, he pulls, like, that's great. So that you can get, if that's a good shape, he wants to get it in. If it's this, he wants to get it in. And it's that's really cool, you know. I think of it like that, like how much that you really see, that you really desire, how much of that can you get in there without it looking ridiculous, you know, without it just looking like a jumble of all my desires, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so there's a painter that I really like a lot, Philip Guston, and he talks about location. Like he goes through these really interesting periods in his work where he's like sort of like he gets like he gets sort of consumed, like almost obsessed about I guess you could say he gets obsessed about these ideas within his work. But he has the courage to follow, like really pursue them, to search them out, which I so deeply admire. And so I remember him talking about one time how the idea of location was so important to him, and I was like, oh, that's a really interesting. Location, like where something is. And it seems like at first like a really straightforward sort of thing. Well, of course, we know where things are because, you know, we use perspective and, you know, all this kind of stuff, where we can just look and see where things are. But you know, he's pointing to something deeper than that, which is like, you know, it's the phenomenology of the form. It's not just the objective, you know, visual recording of like the, you know, the measurement of the form. It's like what it means to be where it is, and the question is, where is it? Because, well, where am I, right? And you know, all this kind of stuff. But and it's really that question is important, and it's the question that Bonnard seems to address in his work over and over and over again, which is why I think things don't stay where we think they are. This is why they move, you know. And a very simple example of that is where you can be sitting in a chair in a cafe, you know, with like a biscuit and a coffee, and you can look across the street through a window that belongs to a shop, and in that window you see something that is desirable to you. It attracts you, and without even having to leave the table, you bring it as close to you as someone sitting across from you at the table. You know, and so that you just changed its location, you know, and in its relationship to you. And so that is something that I've been thinking a lot about, because paintings are ideas of things, right? They're not like things like, you know, we can never paint a head. We can paint an idea of a head, right? But not like an actual head, right? And so that's, you know, there's an incredible amount of freedom that comes with remembering that, oh man, well, yeah, these are ideas that I'm forming here. These are ideas that I can change the rules with. I can begin to, I can change. I can take these ideas and augment them. I can change them. I can do things with them. I can play with them. I can experiment. I can find, you know, things that otherwise I wouldn't even know were possible. You know? And that's something I loved about Augustine, is that he was willing to take those risks in his work and produce phenomenal amount of work. Just like he just produced so much, and it's you know, it makes me want to. It's such a kick in the pants for me, you know, like, what am I doing? I should be producing like 10 times the amount of what I am, not necessarily just in painting, but like just drawing. Like, I should be spending so much more time drawing everything, just everything, you know. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot about too. Yeah.
Yeah. So Augustine, I mean, when I just you know, listen to him on YouTube, there's some interviews with him and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I should just have it on repeat, you know, because people are asking him questions about what his work means, and he's basically saying, my job is to paint the things, you know. It's almost like people are offended when he changed his work or painted this or that or the other, and he's like, I'm just the painter, you know. I'm just the servant of these paintings, and I'm not responsible. Don't blame me. and it's like, that's so true, you know. It's as if people think we're making conscious decisions to paint in this particular way or paint these particular things, and it's like, no, it's not deliberate. We're not trying to say something. We're just servants to the work, you know, and we do what we're told, kind of. I don't know. Obviously, you just listen to him. And but then drawing. So yeah, drawing is this crazy thing. It's like sometimes I have this strange relationship to drawing. A friend not too long ago did say to me, "Oh, you're a good drawer, Norman." And it was like, whoa, that's a huge compliment. I'm trying to believe it, you know? But I spend so much time painting and so little time drawing. And then, in fact, I'm going to have to go in like half an hour, because I have to take my kid to Taekwondo. And when I take him to Taekwondo, I spend the time drawing the people watching, you see? So, but it's kind of like drawing practice. And I'm always questioning myself, why am I drawing? To learn to draw people, but why? Like, I've drawn people all my life. I can kind of draw a person. So what is drawing, and what are my challenges for drawing? And, you know I don't feel confident in drawing. And maybe if I just drew more, I would feel more confident. So that would be an end in itself. But then you're kind of just drawing to gain confidence. And it's like drawing, like I was thinking of Frank Auerbach. I saw one of his big paintings, and it was basically like a drawing, but drawing with paint and brushes this thick.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible drawing. I mean, it was just like the space was just there in these lines. And that is drawing. But then also, you know, also accuracy can be drawing as well. And it's like, you know, like I say, I put so much attention on painting, and I love paint. I love the substance of paint, and I love the fact that you can sell them. And drawings are hard to sell. Like, no gallery wants drawings; they can't make enough money off them. You know, no matter how nice they are. Um, so yeah, anyway, so drawing is a whole other thing.
Yeah, it really is. But because I've had to kind of wrestle with the same questions too, because my inclination is just to, well, if I'm going to draw it, I might as well just paint it. Um, but the thing the thing that I love about drawing, and I started off drawing. I started drawing when I was, as soon as I could hold a crayon. I began drawing. I've drawn my whole life. But then I got so into painting, and I draw in my painting, too. But I got so into it that I just didn't really begin to think about painting and drawing really as separate. But to actually use like an ink or graphite or something like that, and to make lines, I wrote, what I have to remember for me is, like, I have to remember that anything of value that I have that is attributed to the work, in one sense, has come to me because I was willing to receive it. I was willing to be still. And I was willing to sort of engage in a type of silence, or a silence of activity, in a sense. To slow down. I was willing to slow down and stop in a sense, and receive it. And drawing does that for me. It helps me to slow down and to be with something for a long time, where a half an inch on the edge of a form can be an hour's worth of just contemplation, of what is really happening there on the interior edge of that line and the exterior edge of that line. Because on either side, different things are happening, which are affecting the expression of that line that I'm using to describe the edge of that form that I'm observing. And so it helps. It sort of like keeps me sensitive, and it keeps me from falling into this the stupor of assumption, because it's easy for me as a painter to without even meaning to, just to begin assuming, and to come with like these presumptions before a subject, and to start painting really without really seeing the subject. Like I may as well not even be there. Right. And so drawing helps me to, like, it helps me to remember, to slow down, to observe, to really look. And when I do that, every single time, I always see more. I learn more, and I always come away with asking myself the question, why don't I do this more often? More times, Yeah. So that's what it is.
When you're drawing, when you say drawing, what do you draw? Like,
Oh, anything. I mean, anything. Anything as a response to my visual world. It doesn't matter. Just anything. And it's nothing. I mean, it's like the. I mean, it doesn't matter what the form is. It just matters that it's a form. At this point, because of the purpose for why I'm doing it, like why I'm drawing. If I had already developed this sort of sensibility in my drawings to the point where I was able to move past it, or not past it, but it wasn't my central, like, motivation for doing it, then I would get into the meaning of these forms, and like, how the meaning of the form, it would influence the way that I would draw it, and or represent it, something like that, through that medium. But I'm not there, because that could only come if I, like, for example, a book, right? We were talking about Gustin earlier. If I drew a book 5,000 times, then maybe I begin to like get to a place where I can start thinking about the meaning of a book, like the meaning of that object, like the phenomenology of it, and it's the power of its existence, and as a form, and as for what it stands for, and in the history of what it has offered humanity, and all these things, right? And the disappearance of books in the face of technology, or whatever, like whatever that becomes. But no, for now, it's just enough for it to be a form that I need to slow down and observe and see as though I'm seeing it for the first time.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, I love to draw. Like the other morning, I just came upon a Pissarro painting online and just immediately just drew it, and like you say, you see it when you draw it, you see it properly. But yeah, so drawing is, it sounds crazy. This is very vulnerable of me to say, but like, I think as I get slightly older, and I realize that I've put a lot of time and effort into drawings and painting in the past, and I think maybe, I don't know if this is true, but when I go to the college and I'm teaching like 17-year-olds, they're quite happy to spend all afternoon like just copying this little thing. They've got their headphones in and they'll like happily copy this little tiny bit of a picture, and then, oh, I'll do the rest of it tomorrow. And I'm like, your life is going by, get the big brush out and make a statement and do the whole thing. You haven't got time to sit down and just do this tiny little bit. And sometimes I feel like this. It's like, to draw a figure, okay, to draw it by hand is going to take a lot of effort and observation and thought and concentration. Just one drawing. And do I really want to do that if it's just in a sketchbook and that's it? And, I don't know. So it's not a very pure philosophy that I have, but I've got hundreds of drawings in sketchbooks, and it's just thinking like, once I start drawing, I don't think like this, but before I start drawing, I'm thinking, should I really be drawing? I should probably just do some painting.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to think about that more.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because I draw very differently than I used to, which is okay, but the drawing, because of what I get through drawing, it certainly serves the painting, and so when I draw, it's interesting, because I'm not working towards like a finished product, or like, this idea that I'm working towards this image that is going to be art. I'm really drawing as a way to understand something, and like, draw near to it in a way, access it really in a way that I wouldn't be able to otherwise. Which certainly informs, the painting. When I go to paint something, and even if it's I'm painting something, that I haven't drawn, but just the practice of being like so present with something, even just through the paint, allows me to access, access that form at a deeper level. Where I can sort of, I can begin to understand it's like, the essential realities of it, and beyond just the way it looks. I can get into what it's doing,
Yeah. Often I do draw I'll crash into a painting, you know, much bigger and much more ambitious and much more unplanned than I should start. And I'll crash into a painting with this great gusto. And then after a day, I'm like, whoa, where's this juggernaut going?
Right.
And then I'll draw. Then I'll draw the picture and I'll draw the subject again and I'll draw, you know, different angles of the subject and break it apart. And so then I don't have any conscience about spending time drawing then, because it's drawing to reaccess the subject or, you know, go back to the start and feed a painting. But it's this practice of drawing for its own sake or for, like you said, to look. Yeah. Need to think about that.
Yeah, man.
Anyway, you know, this is terrible, but I do have to go because I've got to take my little boy to taekwondo, and
great, that's good.
He's pretty. If you're late, he's pretty tough.
Well, hey, man, Norman, it's dude. I have really enjoyed our talk, and
this is immense. This is, I mean, just great. We never have these conversations. You know, these are not normal conversations. These are, you know, deep stuff, real treasures. So I hope you hit record, because I'm going to be listening back to what you've said.
I think I did. I hope, hopefully it'll work out. But man, it's been wonderful, and I've enjoyed getting to you know, meeting you and conversing with you, man. It's been wonderful. Well, hey, all my best to you and your family, and to the community of painters around you, man. Keep it up, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian.
All right. See you, Norman.
Bye now.